What's up, everyone? Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Danny Murr-Sloat, master cannabis cultivator and co-founder of AlpinStash. Hello, Danny. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's really hot in Dallas these last couple days. So the weather has been kind of brutal, but we're getting through it. You know, AC is a good thing. It's our friend at this point.
Absolutely. I mean, when I haven't ever been to Texas, but when I think about it in the summer, I think very hot.
It's crazy, man. Yeah, and it's wild. I know that you're in is it Lafayette, Colorado?
Yeah, I'm actually live in Longmont, so right between Boulder and Denver.
Okay. And how are you and I know you and your wife work together. We'll talk about that a little later, but how are y'all doing during this crisis and this pandemic? You guys holding up okay?
Yeah, we're doing actually pretty good. You know, we're safe. Fortunately, there's enough, it's a big enough area that we can get everything delivered that we need to or curbside. We have now he's almost a year old. He's like 11 and a half month old kid. So, this pandemic happened during a time in which there was some, just chaos of being a new parent anyways. And we were staying home anyways. So, that was something to keep our minds very busy. And we're continually thankful that our kid is the age that he is and not, in grade school or something like that. So also our business has been able to remain open, and, that's better than most people can say. So we're very lucky.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is a blessing. As we know, we've seen, especially in Texas, a lot of the CBD retail shops have been affected really badly, due to the crisis. So it's good that y'all are able to stay afloat during these crazy times, man. Every day is changing, it's crazy. So
it's super insane. And I don't know if you've kept up in the cannabis industry in different states, but it's very interesting, especially with what's happening with Black Lives Matter and that stuff. But cannabis has been considered an essential business. So it's very interesting that something, that's deemed to stay open and considered an essential business here in Colorado, almost, if you go either, east, west, or north of here, it's, still will land you in jail for depending on what you're doing ever.
right.
Yeah, it's a very interesting juxtaposition, and it makes us hyper aware of just the inequality and systemic racism that it is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I've had a couple of lawyers on recently on the show, and we've talked about the contradictions by the federal government, and how not only how the cannabis, or how they use the term marijuana is listed as a Schedule I narcotic, but also that, like you said, there's businesses now that are deemed essential, but there's still hundreds of thousands of people that are locked up for these cannabis related crimes that they, did in the past. And so it's interesting and it's sad at the same time, that juxtaposition that you mentioned.
It is, but it's also hopeful, because states like Colorado have seen these businesses as so important, and for both medical and recreational, so-called recreational, like as such essential services for keeping people either healthy or just happy, or calm, have a sense of normalcy, a way to unwind and de-stress. I mean, that has been so heightened, that awareness that it is essential. And actually what happened here when we had our first lockdown order, I believe it was in March, Denver was the first city to issue that lockdown order, and they initially declared recreational cannabis along with liquor as non-essential businesses and to be shut down. And we watched that news conference, my wife and I, and we were just like, oh no, this is really bad. And then immediately the news cut to like scenes of people, lining up around these stores because they had 4 hours to purchase. And, within a couple hours after that, they came back out and they said, okay, never mind. Retail cannabis and liquor stores are going to be deemed essential and therefore remain open. And that was, I mean, it was an interesting moment, and it makes, we've always felt like, with the industry being so big and entrenched in Colorado, we've always felt like this is here to stay. But that was kind of like the exclamation point.
Right, right. Yeah. No, that heightened awareness is definitely a positive outcome out of this whole ordeal. The fact that people are seeing that this is a way to, like you said, relax and remove some of that hyper paranoia that a lot of people are having due to loss of jobs or of someone's family member dying or a friend dying of this virus. So, and it's interesting. I think that it's interesting how some states are trying, or we're trying to push that, let's close down these liquor stores and these cannabis shops and deem them non-essential. But it seems like that would just ultimately perpetuate the problem. You know what I mean? People are already stressed out and uneasy. So, and especially if someone is an alcoholic and you kind of rely on that, like to take that away from them during this most stressful time, that doesn't seem like the right approach.
No, no, that I would agree with that completely. And actually, I guess their theory, they had always allowed medical to remain open, but so many medical patients just don't get their cards anymore because, there are some price incentives, but for the most part, it's, super easily accessible just to go into a recreational or retail adult use store and pick up what you need for medicinal purposes. But I think their thinking was, we'll close these businesses because, people crowded them, and, we need to maintain social distancing. And so, but that immediate effect was they just showed videos of people around the block, just, where they wanted to keep people separate in a way, making these, closing these businesses down that everybody needs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what else are you going to do to stay sane at home?
Right.
You can't online. I mean, just, it made it worse. Mm-hmm. And the business got so crowded. So
yeah,
they quickly changed their mind, and that was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's dive deeper into that notion of this heightened awareness regarding the medicinal benefits of cannabis, right? Your story is amazing and inspiring. So much so that last year I know that you were featured in High Times magazine, talking about your transition from opioids to cannabis.
Yeah.
So I know that from reading and doing some initial research, you weren't always a cannabis user. So why don't you tell us a little about that journey, and how it all went down?
Yeah, absolutely. Shortly after I turned 21, I woke up with really extreme stomach pains and went to the ER. I was admitted to the hospital for 4 or 5 days, and pain control was part of the treatment. They did tests. They couldn't find anything. So they released me with a script for Vicodin and, follow up with your doctors. So I spent a few months with a gastroenterologist kind of doing everything in their bag of tricks to figure out what was going on. And finally, they referred me to a neurologist and, encouraged me to go see a physiatrist, a pain doctor. I had been, like I said, on, a daily dose of Vicodin for that time. When I went and saw the physiatrist, the first appointment was, he was like, well, we're going to try to figure out what's going on, but in the meantime, we can, up your pain control because the Vicodin's not really cutting it. And I said, I would appreciate that. And what they put me on at that point was fentanyl. Back in 2003, I believe it was, as the opiate crisis was beginning to brew, I didn't know what that was. Nobody I knew what that was. And today, I believe that wouldn't happen today. But back then, I walked out of that office with a script for fentanyl, both the lollipops and the patches. And over the next, 7-8 years, it was just sort of a downward spiral into, an opiate haze.
And let's talk about that haze for our listeners that don't understand an opioid addiction. They hear it a lot. They hear, that there has been this opioid crisis in this country for quite some time now, over the past decade or even more. But like, walk us through the day to day of like how you're feeling on being so heavily medicated with those pain killers.
Yeah, one of the really interesting and insidious aspects of it, for me personally, somebody that wasn't, that was, sort of kind of ramped up medically, you don't notice it. It's really like a lobster in a pot of water. Like you don't know how bad your judgment is, like how affected you are, how inappropriate your behavior can be, or how much you aren't aware of what's going on until, for me, really, after I got out of it, 8 years later, and have had a lot of time to reflect. At that point, I've realized like how insane everything was, and I had no notion of it. I mean, I remember thinking like, I'm taking all this pain medication, and feel completely, mentally, I feel completely normal. Meanwhile, I'm spending 16 plus hours a day sleeping, taking, medications for side effects of the pain medications and medications for the side effect of those, and so on and so forth. And, my remaining waking hours were mostly, spent in a room or in bed. And there was definitely a medical component of that, pain issues. I developed a nerve impingement problem during this time frame, non-cancerous base of skull tumor. So there was reasons I was like that, but for the most part, it was just, I was so medicated and completely unaware.
That nerve damage that you talked about, is that from the amount of sleeping that you were doing 16 hours a day? Is it just because you were laying on one side and it aggravated that, or?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I think happened. I think, exactly that. It's a nerve impingement between my first rib and my collarbone, and I never got a straight answer as to why it happened, but that's what I believe happened.
That is incredible. And, I personally have known, friends, family members that have also, it started out as just a broken leg,
Hmm.
and this was during that same time, that the early 2000s, right? Where, like I said, a simple break your leg, here's a prescription. And it seemed like the prescription never ended, right? Because maybe the person abused it, or maybe they did need it so much that's all. But either way, it's physically addicting drug, right? So you're at a loss either way, because you're going to get hooked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for different people and for different doctors, there's different reasons. I do believe in retrospect, I mean, I've spent a lot of time, reflecting on what happened and how I got there and what could have been different and all these different things. And I do believe that there are some doctors that are truly compassionate to people in pain and hate to see somebody in pain and want to help that way. And back then, that was the tool that, one of the main tools that was used. And I think there are some doctors who just, don't really care. It's not that they're bad, but they don't know how, they don't see people on a day-to-day basis. Maybe they don't know how much what they're doing affects people's lives, and they don't mind the repeat customers.
Right. Yeah. We don't want to generalize. Of course, there are doctors that have good intentions, but there also are, like you're saying, those doctors that, and in some cases they have quotas, right? They have
Oh yeah.
to sling those pills. They have to get rid of them. So, but I think more and more people are waking up to these alternative medicines, these plant-based medicines, right? And so, tell me about the first time you really tried cannabis, and wow, it was. I mean, was it an epiphany right away? Did it take a while for you to understand it was really working to your benefit?
Yeah. So, my history with cannabis use is I used in high school, like a lot of people did. And I smoked a few times after that, but I had negative experiences, mostly with paranoia. I had some nausea experiences. And so in 2009, when I was pretty desperate, to kind of get out of this funk and find, alternate, uh, you know, thing to help control my pain. I was actually my father that suggested I try cannabis, and and I was resistant to it, but more or less out of desperation at that time, I did. I got my medical card. I waited for a couple of months to actually go make my first purchase at the dispensary, and when I tried that first time, it wasn't. I probably took like a few times for it to be the epiphany that it was, but I did notice right away, both pain improvement and uh, uh, kind of like a space to mentally breathe. Like not only was there pain improvement, which was huge because I had spent 8 years without that, despite surgeries, injection therapies, medication, everything you could think of, I was trying. And so I had pain relief, but I also, had a bit of like a positive experience. I was able to get outside my head and enjoy what I was doing and just be like, oh, this is what it's like to not only not be in that physical pain state, but be in that mental state. The first time it was like, well, that was awesome. But by the second or third time when it continued to happen, this relief I was finding, that's when the epiphany happened.
And you mentioned that your dad is the one who brought it up. So was your dad? Does he have experience using cannabis? I mean, is he an advocate, or where does he play a role in this?
Yeah, so both my parents, are of that generation where they had a lot of cannabis experience. My dad, he moved out to Colorado in 1971 and became a drug defense attorney, and helped start NORML in Colorado.
Wow.
So he was definitely an advocate back then, but over the years, he moved to personal injury law, and sort of while he was always proud of that, he switched his professional focus.
Right.
Um,
And for those who don't know what normal is, do you want to go ahead and explain what that is?
yeah, it's a national organization of marijuana reform laws. Essentially, it's the main driving factor, or one of the main ones, but back then I think it was the one that tried to help these changes come about, and they had a lot of support from the lawyers. One of my dad's friends from that time, actually, he said, I thought that marijuana would become legal in the 70s. I just didn't realize it would be my 70s. So there was a lot of people, that were trying to make this happen for a long time, and it finally paid off.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that we've ever had as much public support for cannabis as we do now. So it's looking good. We just need the federal Schedule 1 to be removed, because that is hindering a lot of the research and learning of this plant that we're missing right now.
It is, and from a business standpoint, the thing that's really difficult for us, and some people know this and some people don't, but banking is a huge issue for us. There are very few banks that will allow cannabis businesses, and those tend to have really high, either really long waiting lists or really high monthly fees. So it's especially prohibitive to small craft or uh, businesses, or ones that are just starting to get off the ground, and that from a business perspective has been that needs to change. It's ridiculous that these businesses deal in cash still, and have trouble just writing and cashing checks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not the only one who's echoed that. It's the two main challenges that I've heard from business owners, lawyers, anybody in that space or that arena, says taxation and banking are
Yeah,
some of the biggest challenges right now. So,
yeah.
yeah. So,
And for us, that the taxation is not really an issue. I mean, it's definitely a high rate. We get tax and excise tax. For us, that's 20%. But at least we know that money is going in part to the state and in part to the city that we operate in, and so we can see the positive impacts that money is having around. So while having that high of a tax rate is prohibitive, to us as a business, and my wife and I as owners taking profits home, we know that that's going for the most part to the better good of our city and our state. So that we're okay with that, but the banking is just very difficult, and for no reason.
sure, sure. And I know the taxation varies from state to state. I specifically, California was where I heard a lot of talk about the challenges when it comes to taxation, just because it's so high out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think last time I checked, Colorado was is up there too, and there's a whole some of the the local cities have something like a 45% plus tax rate on the retail side, so the end customer gets taxed that. And that is ridiculous, but at least there's, like I said, at least there are some good coming out of that, and some money going to schools, and some money
Yeah.
going to homeless shelters and treatment programs, and all these things that as a person I like to see.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's this place in Colorado, actually. It's called Antonito. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's like a real mountainous area. It's on the border
Mhm.
in Colorado, and we go there, a lot for our camping and family trips. And um, since Colorado became a legal state, there's like one or two dispensaries in that town, and you can see like the change in the town. Like, they have curbs and gutters now. They have
Yeah.
like a playground for kids. I mean, this was a small town, that now has a lot of great tourist attraction, things that actually appeal to people coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of this state, is developed, and people come here, but so much of it is not, and was a big, like oil town, for example. And when that industry went bust, so many of these towns are just, desolate, and cannabis has really breathed life back into many towns and made them, tourist destinations. And the upside too is that they're so beautiful, and now people actually go there. Before, there's a lot of towns here that, while they're amazing, you wouldn't necessarily go there because there's nothing there. And now, they're happening, and it's awesome.
Yeah, no, that is great. So, hey, let's get back to what we were talking about with your transition. And when you mentioned how you started using cannabis, you saw that it was helping with your condition more so than, of course, the opioids that you were on. I think I read there was 19 different prescriptions that you went through in that process. So, as you were weaning off those opioids, did cannabis help in any way in the withdrawal process? And because I've heard how extreme and how horrible that feeling is. So did cannabis help at all?
Yeah, I mean, cannabis is the reason why I believe that I was able to do it. And I actually, to be honest, didn't have as rough a time as some people do, as a lot of people do. For a couple of reasons. Number one, I was so ready to be off this medication, both physically and mentally. And when I found relief um, with cannabis, that gave me the push and the incentive I needed. But I think more importantly for me, I weaned myself off on my own. So I was able to do it in a way and in a time period that was comfortable for me. And I was able to reduce my medication. I was consistent with it, and I never took any steps backwards. But I was able to do it at a speed in which, when I finally got off everything, um, it was a fairly minor experience. But building my confidence up to get there, I told myself, every time I don't feel good, or every time I feel stressed, or every time I'm worried about this, I'm just gonna smoke more cannabis, and eat and take an edible. And if I don't remember those 2 weeks of my life because I was so stoned, then that's probably a good thing. And I was very successful for me.
That's
And yeah, I mean, cannabis is why. And the interesting thing to all this is that, I think now this is more well understood, but the weird thing about chronic pain, especially when it comes from muscles, is that the more you try to dull that pain without fixing the problem, the more your body devotes its nerve pathways to that pain. So you're always chasing this issue. The more medication you take without addressing the problem, or fixing it, the worse that your pain gets. The more you need medication, the worse that your pain gets. And the other problem is just the stagnation that's caused. I mean, if you sleep for 16 hours and spend the rest of your time, like, laying in bed or sitting, like, your body's going to be in pain. And so when I got off, as I got off this pain medication, and as I was inspired to move and to go back into nature, hike and things like that, thanks to cannabis, the more I moved my body, the more that I improved. A lot of these issues that I had, like the nerve impingement issues, were from being so stationary and so stuck in that. And so when I got off pain medication and got active again, a lot of my issues resolved.
hmm Yeah, you bring up really good points in that, like, there's so many commercials that you see for prescription medication, and if you listen to the end where they say all the side effects, right? But some of these commercials are actually geared toward, the subset of what you're currently taking. So if you're taking a benzodiazepine for depression, you need this other pill for added depression or for whatever, right? It's crazy how that just kind of adds on to itself, and it further perpetuates the problem instead of trying to help balance it or even fix it, you know. And then the second point you made about the fact that it just kind of makes you a vegetable, right? And just you just want to lay down, sleep, not get up. Your body's not moving. Your metabolism's not working the way it should. So, you know, there's various side effects, including like you experienced the pinched nerve, but also, I mean, constipation. You have irregular bowel movements. There's all kinds of things that kind of don't fit. When it's you're so heavily dependent. But you mentioned that you got to a point when you weren't, so that had to have been like the best feeling in the world, that the fact that you're non-dependent on those drugs. I mean, how did that feel? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty fantastic. But again, you know, this is the interesting thing is it's a lot of this is like in you know, as I reflect upon it, I when I got off, I was of the medication, the pain medication, and the other prescriptions for many of the side effects, you know, kind of fell away as I began taking, you know, pieces out of that. I no longer was so sedated that I needed to take, you know, Adderall to actually wake up and function. I was very happy and proud of myself. But the interesting thing is I had been uh, so ready for it to happen that I was just happy that I was, you know, not necessarily getting off of medication, but just have everything improving, you know, in my life, you know, fairly dramatically over a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. And it's like you said, cannabis, right? Anytime you kind of felt that discomfort or sick or nausea or stress, you just smoke, everything would kind of be better. You'd feel better. And, you know, over time, you didn't even think about that addiction and needing that medication, right?
Yeah. And I feel that I was very lucky that it went that way for me, but absolutely, you know, the other thing that cannabis provided is it made me be able to enjoy whatever I was doing to distract myself more, whether that was hiking or, I mean, even watching TV, you know, just being able to focus on something else and, you know, allow my psyche to heal and to have space from being just so focused on, you know, my medical issues, all the medication I was on and how bleak I felt like, you know, things were.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So outside of, well, thinking about like other plant-based alternative medicines, have you heard of any other plants that help with the addictive properties related to opioids? So, for instance, like I know there's again is a type of molecule, I guess, that helps with those receptors. Ayahuasca is another. Are you familiar with any of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Ibogaine supposedly has an 80+% recovery rate, you know, and apparently one or two treatments is all you need, even with things as common as nicotine. From what I've heard, it's a very, very intense experience and not available in the United States. And ayahuasca is another one of those. And you know, very high success rate, you know, and one of the things that is interesting, and I definitely feel like this with cannabis, but these plant-based medicines, they're sort of the opposite of an opiate, whereas an opiate or a pharmaceutical just makes you a zombie, you know, and I mean that also in that, you know, not only are you zonked out, but you're also consuming, you know, food, carbs, you know, sitting there watching TV, you're just become a consumer. And whereas these plant-based medicines, I believe, in my experience, encourage you more to be plugged in and in tune with life. And you know, opiates are it's almost like metaphorical death. And for some people, it's very physical. But these plant-based medicines like encourage the opposite of that. They encourage you, you know, boy, I want to go out and hike in the mountains. Like, boy, I want to go. I mean, the people that make the trips, you know, to Peru to do ayahuasca or Brazil, you know, South America, and these places now that do, you know, iboga, ibogaine, even just the act for some people of making that trip, uh, physically getting to the destination where you take those drugs is a pretty big accomplishment. The other one I'm familiar with is kratom, specifically for pain. That's been in and out of the news, and I'm by no means an expert, but apparently that does really well and can help people get off opiates.
Hmm. Yeah, I bring up Ibogaine. I'm gonna have actually a former director of operations at a clinic in Mexico, an Ibogaine clinic, to talk about kind of what they're working on and how they go about their process. And it's interesting stuff, man. It really is, and it's good that we can have these discussions and this type of dialogue to learn more about it, because I think that in a lot of ways it's unknown to most people.
Absolutely, and a lot of these medicines have such a high success rate. But I think one of the really important things that Western medicine is historically so absent of is taking care of the mind and the psyche. So when you take these plants that affect you physically but also mentally, if you're receptive and in a space to kind of work on those aspects, from what I understand, both ayahuasca and ibogaine are very in your face. These are issues you have to deal with emotionally, mentally, and we're going to work through this. Cannabis, I feel like it can have that, but you also need to be a bit more sensitive. It's not as forceful with that, but they all promote healing of the mind, and for people that you know the opiate dependency is more mental, I think, than physical. There's a yes, if you're addicted and you get off, you feel like utter crap. You might feel horrible for a couple of weeks, but if you're looking at that from a logical thing, a couple of weeks is not a lot of time to trade for the rest of your life. But there's such a mental aspect, and a lot of it is trauma and damage and
Hmm.
fear of being better, which is one thing that I didn't realize. Fear of actually having to live up to expectations internally and externally, and what that would look like. These medicines that help with the mind just sort of help that so much, and I think that, and I know I'm not alone, but that's one of the reasons they're so much more successful.
Hmm. No, well, I mean, and they remove that ego, right? They kind of remove you from yourself.
Yeah,
Ayahuasca and psilocybin and ibogaine, obviously on a different level, like you're saying, more psychedelic, more, you're seeing things, you're having a spiritual experience. But cannabis, I mean, in my experience, I'm just more self-aware,
yeah, yeah,
what's going on. And I know a lot of people that say that they're paranoid, right? Whether they're adults or if they're kids trying it. But I understand, if kids are, you shouldn't be doing it, smoking, if you're under 21, because we've seen and read studies where your brain isn't fully developed, right? You're still developing and growing your brain. So in a way, I could see why you would be hyper paranoid as a young kid smoking weed. You know what I mean? But if you're an adult and your brain is fully formed and then you might have a different experience. But of course, everybody's different. So.
yeah. I feel like, for me at least, I just, and for some people that have this need to just control their lives and they can't let go of things, that's the situation that I found, in which paranoia is more likely to happen, because it's like your ego is obliterating. It's ego death, right? Like, you have to let go. These things make you try to let go, and if you fight it, that's when you get paranoid. And if there are underlying issues that you're not ready to tackle, as you sort of step outside yourself, those might become apparent, and that might freak you out. Like these things. I mean, classic times that I've been more stoned than I would like. I think about the things I did when I was 5, and I was like, man, I was an asshole when I was 5. And if you're not prepared for that, like, and that's just a little thing that happened a long time ago, but if there's bigger thing in your lives, if you're
Right.
not prepared for that, like, yeah, that's scary.
Right.
And
It's almost like you have to be in a good place with yourself, which makes sense, like in anything, right? In relationships, in marriage, like you got to work on yourself before anything else, right? Before
yeah,
you're giving yourself to others. And those plant-based alternative medicines are a great approach and a good step in doing that, I would think.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And from my understanding of both ayahuasca and ibogaine, is it's like it's a force. You are doing this, and there is no we're not escaping this. We're not like watching TV and going to sleep. Like we are working through this, and suppose apparently like in a very like loving and gentle and understanding way. Like you're a good person, and let's find out why you're a good person. But like there's no escaping that. And in cannabis, I think some people that take that have these paranoid experiences like don't expect that. And if you're not ready for that, and you've got some things bubbling under the surface, like so the times that I've had paranoia since then, I've tried to step outside myself and say, okay, what is this thing that's making me paranoid? And then when I'm not stoned, maybe that's a good time to work through that, and then you can find another aspect of that when you are stoned. But they bring to the surface the things that you need to work on, and I feel like if you go in to any of these things with that intention, you'll have a positive experience.
Yeah, I mean, I have a buddy, a college friend, David Noche. Shout out to Dave. And he said Ibogaine changed his life. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a whole experience where he couldn't hide from himself. It was really self-reflective, and he went through the same type of opioid addiction that you did, and he's a better man for it. I just talked to him today, and he's doing great. So
Yeah, I know at least one veteran that had really bad PTSD and went to the jungle and did ayahuasca, and interacting with them now, it's like a whole different thing. And I think a lot of that has to do with you have to forgive yourself, and I think these medicines help you see that and understand that.
mm-hmm. For sure. So let's switch gears. So you found cannabis. You saw it as a great alternative. It was you're in the right state. So now you start and you create your own business, AlpinStash. And before we get into the business, which I'm really interested in, how is it like? What's it like to work with your wife?
That's an awesome question. For the most part, it's amazing. There are some times that it's very frustrating. Just like many relationships, we definitely, we work together, we live together, we now have a kid together, and there is not a lot of alone time. And there was many things that we had to work through, and some of them we were like, this is what we need to work through, looking forward. And some of them were like, holy crap, that argument was horrible. Like, we got to work on that. And, we taking time for ourselves, having a hard shut off, it's 6 p.m. on Saturday. We're not talking about work. Those type of things. When we hire people, we say, have you ever, or interview people, have you ever worked for a husband and wife team? Because, there are times where, we argue, and, but all those things. I mean, she's, amazing partner in life and in business. And without her, AlpinStash wouldn't be anything it is today. And being able to share in the success and build each other as well as the business is just so rewarding.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that y'all make a really good team, especially with all the street cred that y'all have had since you've opened up shop in Colorado. I know that you have some famous strains here. I might butcher the names, but I want to know about these strains and how you came up with the name. So Lemony Winks.
Yeah, Lemmy Winks. So so you probably are not a huge South Park fan, or maybe you are, but I don't know how deep your history of South Park goes.
So I like the show, but I don't watch it enough to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So the way we come up with the strain names is sometimes we try to do sort of include the genetic lineage in the name. For example, we have one orange chemsicle. There's chemdog in that lineage, and there's sort of like, that one smelled very much like an orange creamsicle, and then the chemsicle, came, and so that kind of did itself. Yeah. And sometimes, we just feel inspired, and we like to. I mean, we're pretty nerdy, and we like to kind of pay tribute to, things like that. So we have another one we just named as little Sebastian after Parks and Rec. But Lemmy Winks in South Park is a gerbil that they put up Mr. Slave's butt, and there's a whole adventure like The Hobbit, where Lemmy is the gerbil king and has to adventure. And so, they're from Colorado. We went to school in Boulder, my hometown. Growing up, they were like the hometown heroes and really a big part of my teenage years. And so it just fit, and we love it.
It's a great show, man. I love how they're able to get away with what they get away with,
Oh, yeah.
especially in this day of censorship. But they're brilliant because it's all cartoons. They've found those loopholes and those nuances within the FCC, right? To get away with a lot of this stuff. It's amazing. And they're genius. It's so funny. I need to watch more of it. My sister's a huge fan, and I keep telling her that I'm going to get on it, but I just need to start doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome.
We're too into Naked and Afraid XL right now. That's a pretty.
Oh yeah, that one's great too. Yeah, so we really have fun with our cultivar names. My wife's a big Harry Potter nerd, and so we've got some stuff that kind of, our Cookie Confundo and new one, Orange Obliviate, are both Harry Potter references. And then a lot of the things are references to if the name is a reference, it's often to something that we either share together, or we try to make a little bit obscure. So if you kind of know, like I know I could tell that you hadn't seen a ton of South Park, because if I say Lemmy Winks to some people, they'll just laugh.
They just know right away.
Yeah. If I say, because once you like you totally know, you should Google Lemmy Winks. There's a great little 2-minute YouTube song. I think you'll get a kick out of it.
I will. No, I'll check it out for sure. So basically, it's just like you'll come up with a genetic strain, and then whatever the terpene scent is, or whatever it kind of is, you formulate based off your prior experiences, whether it's TV shows or anything that you're interested in. Is that
well, we if we can incorporate that and it rolls off the tongue and it fits, then we'll do that. But sometimes, Lemmy Winks is just a complete obscure reference. It definitely doesn't smell like a gerbil of a butt. I want to be clear with that. It actually smells a lot like grape Skittles. But I think there's a balance between making things accessible to people, building your brand. There can be an issue if we have everything be obscure, because we're trying to establish ourselves as a brand. And so we want to have some familiar aspects and some things for people to come, kind of seek us out for, like, oh, I really like ChemDog, and AlpinStash has, AlpinDog. And so maybe, that's a good place for me to start. And then you kind of get into us, and then you can check out all of our other stuff that's a little bit more obscure in the name. So really, that's been one of the awesome things about my wife is, we balance each other out. Whereas I'm very much like, let's name this cultivar, a 5-word name that's super obscure and you'll probably forget. And she's like, hang on. Like,
she's like,
why don't we?
Less is more. Hold on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it's been, and to be honest, it's one of the most fun parts is coming up with these names. But like I said, when it fits and we can pay, homage or include part of the genetic lineage in there, we do. And sometimes just a good name just pops up.
Right. So, well, let's talk about your company, AlpinStash. So how did you get started? And I know that you're vertically integrated, right? So why don't you talk about all your operations?
Yeah. So we get started. So when I was skeptical of cannabis in general, and then I took it, and it helped so much for me. I was like, this is so legit, and this is here to stay. I was very much, I container gardened. I should mention this, it's pretty important to my story, but I received a clone free with my first dispensary purchase. And, having something to do, to interact with, a reason to get out of bed, to grow this plant, was as big, if not more, for my recovery than the actual ingestion of cannabis. So as I began to care for these plants and be healed by cannabis, I realized, this is so therapeutic for me. Like, this is what I want to do. And it's so legit in terms of a medicine that this is not stopping. There might be some hurdles that we jumped through, but I think as a society, we're moving in that direction. I really had no job skills, so to speak, no real professional future. But in that time that I had where I was so sick, and just unhappy, I really wanted, I knew that the one thing that I wanted to do going forward was do something that I enjoyed. And, growing was that pursuit of a high quality flower, growing as best and as cleanly as I could was, became a passion. And it took, 4 or 5 years at least to get that up and running off the ground. We were licensed in 2014. We opened in 2015. We've been moving forward ever since.
Such an amazing story, man. And when you put it in perspective of like, not only did when smoking it, it helped you, but the fact that you were caring and nurturing these plants by growing them, cultivating them, it gave you purpose, right? It got you up out of bed and got you moving, got you more active, got your inspirations, your hopefulness back. So in a way, it was like a give and take for both sides. It sounds like,
Absolutely.
mutual relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I had such a healing journey with the cultivation side of it too, it's really important to us to share our knowledge and our experience. And we're very much, for caregiver and home grow rights. We do everything we can. We share everything we know. We really enjoy empowering people to grow themselves.
Mm-hmm. That's great, especially where you're legal. It's legal to do so.
Absolutely.
What I also find fascinating about what you said, and I completely agree with you with, and it's the same mindset that I have, is that there's too much evidence and it's testimonials that this cannabis plant works and helps in a lot of different ways, right? And we're still learning about the cannabinoids that are found in the plant. We've only scratched the surface with identifying, I think, like 15 of them. So like you said, it's only a matter of time. There may be hurdles that we jump through, but as we are becoming more and more aware of, is right now what we're doing when it comes to opioid addiction and pain management is not working. So
No.
It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and a question I get asked sometimes is like, did I experience any pushback? Have I come across anybody that doesn't agree with cannabis and think I should have gone a different route? And the answer is overwhelmingly no. I mean, if you knew me before I started cannabis and you knew me after, like, there was no way that you would say that I should have done anything different.
Mm-hmm.
I know I changed some minds. Nobody confronted me, but my, doctor that I was seeing, for example, like actually, had kicked me out of their practice because they didn't know what to do anymore. And then when I came back 3 years later, lost 90 pounds and was healthy and off all the medications again. After that point, when I started going to doctor's appointments, they were asking me questions and they were, hey, I have a patient that, what do you think of this? And how should I broach the subject with them? Really.
So they're asking you for advice now, like based off, because obviously losing 90 pounds and getting to a place where you're at now, I would imagine they have questions. So you're saying they're very open to what you're telling them in terms of cannabis as a alternative medicine?
Absolutely. I mean, this all happened back in like 2012. So it's been a few years, but once they saw me again, the last image they had of me was this before picture, of which I looked, horrible. And now here I'm back and look great. Yeah, they would ask me questions about that. I think now the knowledge base has grown. In 2012, it was not nearly as acceptable as it is, here we are 8 years later. So I think it's just, for them normal anyways, but that, I was one of the first experiences they had with, somebody that had such a dramatic recovery, specifically thanks to cannabis, because they knew everything that I had been through, all the treatments I had they knew everything that had happened beforehand. And therefore they knew that the one change
Mm-hmm.
was cannabis. It's not like, I went and got these 10 therapies, tried this drug and cannabis. It was just, that was it.
Right. They saw that it was for the better and it was doing more good than bad. So it was
Yeah.
there was no reason to question it, which is interesting because, I've had people on, and including myself in my own experience, where there is some judgment, and
Oh yeah.
there is some questioning, like, well, why is she doing that, or why is he doing this? I haven't personally got it, but I would imagine that there are people within my social network that are talking and going, why is he doing that? It's risky, or it's this and that. And to be honest, I don't see it as being risky, because not only of what we've talked about and how much we're learning more and more about the medicinal value of the plant, but also with the Farm Bill being passed, in 2018, and industrial hemp, and the state of our economy right now, like, it's going to be a driving force. It's going to help in so many different ways, not only with production and manufacturing for goods and on the medicinal side, but the benefit of the plant itself to the earth. It takes in a lot of CO2 emissions, which is really good for the planet. So it just is going to be a matter of time until people are educated.
Absolutely. And I feel like, I'm very fortunate that where I grew up and how I grew up and who I grew up with, cannabis was pretty acceptable. And, I know that there are people that have pushbacks, and I know that there are people that believe that, in all the propaganda and the reefer madness stuff and all of that. But, at the end of the day, I feel like, as each state passes legalization for medical, my case is, not that unique. There are tons of people that have been drastically healed, many from way worse positions than I was. And, if somebody that is, dying, and they take cannabis and all of a sudden they're better now, you'd have to be a pretty bad person to judge them for that. And the more those stories happen, then it's like, oh yeah, my neighbor's kid, was healed by cannabis. Oh yeah, my friend was healed by cannabis. Oh yeah, yes, I was healed by cannabis. And then the other thing they realize is that, the sun still rises. All the other problems in the world are still all the other problems in the world. COVID-19 still exists. And really, you're really pissed at somebody for, at worst, at most irresponsible. They're just trying to unwind and have a happy moment in all this chaos. And at best, they're literally saving their lives. You wouldn't go to somebody that's, having an asthma attack and judge them for taking an inhaler.
Right.
Like, and I think it's very difficult to do that. And there were times, where I wish somebody would have debated me, because I wanted to, talk about that, but I never, nobody ever did. And it would be really easy to shoot them down if they tried.
Well, and that's the thing. I haven't gone out proactively to look for someone, but like some of these politicians that are against the legalization of marijuana or cannabis, or even physicians and doctors who may not, believe that we have an endocannabinoid system, right? And these types of facts that have come out, I'd love to have them on and just hear their perspective, because to your point, I don't hear a lot of opposition, but there is opposition, obviously, at the federal government level and in the medical, industry, but we don't know the reasonings why. It always just points back to, well, it's federally illegal. It's a Schedule 1, but okay.
Yeah.
But what else? What else you got? You know what I mean? Because we have peer review studies and we have factual data to back up a lot of these claims.
Yeah, and if you dig deeper, a lot of times you can find that there are special interest groups that are, benefit from cannabis remaining illegal. The prison workers, police unions, big pharma, the alcohol industry. Just like one of the reasons it was made illegal in the first place is that it was a threat to the paper industry that was booming, back in the 20s. So, that tends either the propaganda and the misinformation and brainwashing is responsible for people's, anti-cannabis views, or there's an ulterior and sometimes nefarious motive, involving big money. There are people that have had bad experiences, and Joe Rogan, the podcaster, one thing that he said a lot that I've heard him say is, peanuts kill some people. Like, not everything is for everybody.
Hey, everybody's different. You're right. Yeah.
And you should respect, this is a substance, you should respect it chocolate's a substance, sugar's a substance that's way more deadly. All these things can hurt people. It's not 100% safe for everybody all the time, but nothing is. And so there are some people that have had bad experiences, and we shouldn't take anything away from them for those experiences, but that can be said at anything.
Right. And the underlying thing, and we've talked about it, is education, because even if you're one of those people who have bad reactions to it or had bad experiences with it, at least be knowledgeable about it and understand the applications of it and how it can benefit someone medically who has certain issues, because
Yeah.
that is the most important thing. You don't have to do it. You don't have to even agree with it, but know what it does and know the value of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some of these people that have had bad experiences, that's a factor of it being illegal. I mean, without oversight or correct knowledge in its cultivations and curing, there are, I mean, that has been a lot of people's bad experiences have to do with that directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I know that you said that you're one of many, which is true, but your story is unique in that you're doing the right thing by spreading that awareness, you know what I mean, and providing that education. And having you on the show and sharing your story, I truly appreciate it. And I know that a lot of our listeners has gained a lot of knowledge just based off of what you've went through and what you learned from your experience. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Danny.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm always happy to talk about this stuff, and it really, I try to do this, in our videos that we have to teach people about growing itself. But if you can learn from the mistakes that I've made, or the journey that I've been on, and that can help enrich your life in any way, then even if they were mistakes, they weren't completely mistakes. I've gained something out of them, and so it really is a pleasure to talk about, about this and about, everything that I've been through.
Well, the pleasure is all mine, and keep doing what you're doing. I learned a lot today, and it really kind of reinforces my respect for the plant, and how there's that mutual benefactor, right? Like, the plant can do something for us, but we can also do something for the plant, also.
Yeah, and if I may, one of the things about being such a small craft grow, we have, besides my wife and myself, we have 2 full-time employees, 1 part-time employee. We do everything by hand. We do everything in the best way that we can to really, we believe this reflects our energy, onto you, the consumer. And so we want to put the best energy and intention and love in we can. But, I really encourage people to, if you are in a legal state and you are able to purchase this, find the grows and find the businesses that you support. Do a little bit of digging, because there's a lot of people that have a mindset behind cannabis of just making money and cutting corners, and big companies and corporations that are doing this, and us little guys, we're out there and we're trying to provide the best product and have the best healing for you, or positive experience, or whatever it is. This is our passion, and spend some time, dig, and support the companies that you believe in.
Absolutely. And this is a good time for you. If there's any websites or social media that you want to shout out, go ahead and do that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is alpinstash.com. That's AlpinStash.com. Our Instagram is AlpinStash. We have a YouTube channel where we go over some of our cultivars and our growing techniques. That's also AlpinStash. We're very accessible. If people have questions, they can always hit us up. And we love interacting. We love sharing knowledge. We love empowering, and we love just chatting.
Well, I've really enjoyed chatting with you today, Danny. Thank you again so much for sharing your amazing, inspiring story, and continue to educate people about the medicinal value of the cannabis plant. And I hope to have you on again real soon.
Yeah, anytime, man. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Take care.